haven't gotten into the, we should have been replanting
to the west.
Yeah. Replanting trees on every face, just, okay, we're gonna do 10 trees each year, they'll get them all in place. We didn't do that, they were in the middle of changing Sexton. And so, things were down on a regular basis out there. Who's also on the center for years now. Took care. I mean, that was his pride and joy, go out there and make sure everything looked good and looked nice. So it did. Well, since then, we've gone through like 3 or 4 and none of them last very long. They do half-ass jobs. Someone who complained quite a bit about it on Facebook. Sister-in-law was on the board. Yeah.
I already know who you're talking about.
No, he was, no, not pretty much. I think that's exactly what he said. Probably not so nice. Yeah. I've been on. Who hasn't?
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, that's what surprised me, that we had the observation. The craziness. One night, one Saturday night, got a call, kid, so when he first started, he goes, hey, what's the legalities on the green burials and gifts? Like, he's like, I got a call, this is like 7:30 on Saturday night. He goes, I got a call, and I have no idea who these people are, but his mother passed away in the city, and they're literally bringing her up in this suburban. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, what?
Places like you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so in Kansas, Columbia would be very, 12 or 24 hours.
Yes, yeah, and she had just passed away. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, I didn't know the name, nothing. She passed away.
Did they get her buried?
But yeah, they did. They ended up, what they did, that price. He was, but they finally.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, I don't know. We got these decisions. We figured out when Kelly Party was there for a while. If Victor said, just go with me, put a flag out there, it was wrong.
Yeah.
But if he went in, yeah, he just said, yeah, go out there, I got the mark. Middle of town.
Yeah.
And the other, like, not even, I mean, like, right here, close to, no, yeah, like, we're not even close. Yeah, he just, well. Robbie Rod's dad. Robbie, but they said it. Cemetery board.
And they were referring to me, we'll try to get it taken care of. So I finally got Derek City. Pretty obvious.
Yeah,
Where it's driving. And the guy was out there to go. He was out there that day and showed me. I even questioned him. And so then because I know how to be sometimes to work with. I mean, by God, I'm right.
Don't just go up and the two of all you will.
I know I'm right. So. I thought we were like, I understand why they're very famous. No one's gonna risk moving this.
Yeah.
Because it was the same kind of thing with me. Yeah. Double family type. So he finally admitted, yeah, I probably told him wrong. I said, well, someone's got to take care of this, and they were too much. We can't leave there.
Well, that's what we got to do, a while back. Well, so that's it.
For this operation.
The county knows it, but the church takes care of it. Like all, so they come in and they're like, well, I said, no, good church. This isn't our fault. We just know. And so they got to take about 3 months. That's cost.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm here, Nicholson's there, so. And it was cold,
And I'm like, okay, and he goes, well, that lot is coming over into your, and that wall's coming over into your block. I'm like, so I guess you'll have to cut the corner of the wall out. He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, it's not my fault. The wall, our family's supposed to be buried, you know? And, I'm like, not my deal. I mean, he's like, that's not 4 foot pictures. I'm like, and so he was all worried. He's like, oh, we gotta go out and look at this. So, in the meantime, I called his brother-in-law because he had stuff I decided to do, and they go out and mark it off, and it wasn't that big. But it's all brand, it's not mine. I'm like, that's your problem, dude. I'm good to go. But yeah, that's very good.
That's the part that I wouldn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Simon's wondering if you got it. Is this your first term?
Oh, you just reelected this.
You are really crazy. I'm really starting to question your level of intelligence.
Yeah. It's really, it's been a good learning experience.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you think that,
Oh, they're not.
I want to hear this.
like, you killed it. I know, this will be, my wife told me, I could listen to those guys at 20 years ago.
But you want to make sure somebody that is getting in there.
Right, then you want to be able to do it, but you know, that's what like Steve going there calls the ball.
Yeah, I'm gonna change a lot of things.
We're gonna
find
find out
out.
every CD, yeah, you're like, oh, really, because it's easy to sit back and go. You go in there and like, oh, we're changing some stuff, boys. You're like, no, you can't do that.
How often does that happen? We're getting ready to go for our first meetings with each commissioner in each county again. And I can tell you it happened all the time.
Yeah, because we had, I don't know when Wells had first got on. You know, like third, second Monday, you know, whatever. We're like, yep, gonna do this, we're gonna do this. We're all good to go, we're on 10.
What do you mean we can't do that? Like, I'm gonna call the shots here. Yeah, like, no, we gotta do that. No, they can't.
At least you listen. Sherman County, they said, okay.
Just do it anyway.
But, yeah, at the next meeting, they'll sit there and, say, we know we can't do this. They all kind of like look at each other like, oh.
What's in the minutes last month?
Well, I can't
We
tell you
do,
what.
we do a good job. It's gonna be like, yep. And she'd be like, no, maybe we better make a call first before you start motioning.
Interesting, in our experience, and you know, the one thing that I do, this is the way we go.
Yeah.
Simply because it's always been done incorrectly. You get it, you do it.
Yeah. That was 30 years ago.
Yeah. If we did say anything.
Or it'd be like, well, we have certain, you know, such and such county tax.
And the best part is when they know the answer, but they don't want to tell whoever's in there. Then they call you.
Yeah,
they call
a room
us.
full of people and say,
Say,
we
"We're not-
want to do this, we think this is a good idea. I just started going to executive session, just got some second line meeting before.
Yeah, you guys are on your own.
That's the lead answer.
I'm always in for good reason.
How's word spread that fast?
It's never open. Yeah. Oh,
Isn't that true?
and that was before council.
And nobody saw you either.
Didn't have internet, didn't have anything.
That's the bigger one. Nobody ever saw you. Yeah. Jason, with you?
He's the.
Yeah, but we've actually worn off on Facebook. Yeah, when we first got on, you could tell. But I think, you know, it's good to have.
For the longest time.
You know, just to cost.
Yeah. That experience also kind of helped with a lot of it. How?
It didn't.
Let's take a step back. And a lot of times, everybody else you would just ask the right questions.
Yeah, because that's the way when we first started. And Vic could be like, Andrew Jason, but we got up. He just kind of wait, let everything.
Oh, you guys. Good.
And they didn't do it.
How are you doing?
It's
Good to see you as well.
no back color.
No, no.
can remember, I hadn't been back very long, and I was out of my office. How are they going to you guys? I had somebody that was me.
Involved back.
And I said, I finally take it, it's not got you after. I got sick. All of it, nothing. Anything that decision, go get you. I don't get paid. Yeah. Moment later, you come back and call it. It's bad. I don't understand why.
What's that?
Guys also nice. That's always an experience. I had an experience, but I was always lucky. I yeah. Marty, I probably figured that out. Yeah, no, that's exactly like he just rolled with it. Yeah.
And you can,
Years out there, every kind of days they work on the day. I go to the And I'm like, I'm just gonna stand back over here and hang out. It's too dirty.
Yeah, well, I see you there. King in Nebraska, he was trying to get a crew together. Yeah, there was never no.
no, okay. I used to share your
I'm going home. I didn't know. Not bad.
I saw that, I checked online.
I know that I saw the first meeting of the first thing we're gonna do. He also, my dad, his coach was on. So he told Mark as well, if I got on, I'd say. He said, I don't need to be out here, so I'm out here helping your dad. Everybody would shoot my butt and go with your dad.
Yeah, that's what, when I first started. I moved south. And he's like, he's just gonna eat your ass. That's what I wanted to wrap it up 4 years and
And so we're trying to go back. The best word you can hear first is you get there, get to the point, and
we were one night, and we were catching our shirt.
How are you?
All in.
What you got?
Had the house, had all the food. They turned the camper around, it was all built house.
That might be handy.
I don't walk in the house. Really is here. I shook my head at us, he's in the old cat we had in the house. Now it's got tired of everybody. Oh, yeah, you better believe it. You know, and so they're like, yeah, so we just all went downstairs. We read all their this thing helps out bad. So, long story short, Hank never did show up. Nobody would have ran, so Scott was. Nobody could come again. Pretty soon, after like 45 minutes, he walks in. Al is too. Well, he got to town, pulled the semi in the shed, closed the door, and put up there, all the tires and bullshit. No, that, you know, but he could, so Mark and Scott are out looking for him, and I was like, what? Al's yeah, that's what, that was what was funny. All the skeptics have yeah, this is funny. He's like, I run this operation. I didn't give a cell phone. Yeah, he had. Yeah, he did. Never missed a beat. Just kept right on walking for long. Good heavens. Oh, yeah. Right. We got home one night now, so I think if we had made it, yellow. I didn't know what to do. I mean, it just went everywhere. It's like all this other tank, you got around the corner, just go to bed and I'm like, and I was covered in it. So I'm trying to go down. And that morning when I got up, there wasn't a red spot. I went out to clean that thing. There wasn't a red spot. Man, when it was in one of the big old bowls. He had a ground. Yeah, he just did it. He didn't look bad. He come down. Twice a year. Spike. Yeah. You got a hammer or a sledgehammer? Hey, yeah. I don't know if you're a big enough boy to get it out of the back of the pickup. Roll some head. Yeah, I just remember the face of that kid was just like, you didn't know. Hey, just drove on. Just let him stand in the race. Who was one?
I just remember Hank.
Really said
How long is it? He's gonna get up there. He's gonna get up there and go.
Can I photo bomb?
I think I want to put a plaque out there, and a video, and I'll talk off the side, and I'll have a plastic.
You guys, never get out of control.
We're gonna try to keep it short, sweet,
You're standing there, like one of the bubbles, and like, can you show me documentation on this?
Yeah, that.
Yeah, I know, but that's okay. We like change.
Good, you. Yeah.
I just saw.
Okay. Well, I was just.
If everybody would want to start finding a seat, we'll get started here in a few minutes. Thank you.
Hey, you can't bring your bag up here. Tote your bag.
Works for me. Where's your 20 voting? 20 votes worth. I told my parents, I was like, it'd be interesting to see if the bylaws are interesting.
Ready when you are.
Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order for the 64th annual meeting of the Scott Co-op. We do have barely have enough members to have a quorum, so.
Let's call. Zoom call for it.
Okay, I'll call upon Mark to go over that. Bill's my microphone, man. I'm looking the proof of registration bylaws of the Scott Co-op Association define a quorum as 20 members of the association entitled to vote. We currently have 22 voting members registered for our meeting. We also have the proof of due notice. The bylaws of the Scott Co-op Association require notice of stockholders meeting to be mailed at least 10 days prior to the date of the meeting. Proper proof has been given that notice of the stockholders meeting was mailed on December 17th, 2020. All requirements have been met to conduct the shareholders meeting this evening. Guess we're going to get into the minutes of the 63rd annual meeting. The minutes of the 63rd meeting were mailed with the notice of the annual meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes from the 63rd annual meeting? If there are no corrections, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes presented. Aaron, thank you. Moved. Can I have a second? Thank you. Second. Okay. The minutes are approved as presented. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to introduce you to a few guests that are joining us this evening. A lot shorter list than we're used to just due to the situation. But we have Nick Muting from Lindbergh Vogel, Pierce Ferris. He's the auditor. We have Charles Mosier and Brett Mangan from Mosier Mangan Law in Tribune. They are the general counsel for the Scott Co-op and past employees. We've got Arlen Reed sitting back here hiding in the corner, and past/semi-retired Bob Blair is sitting back in the corner as well. So thank you guys for attending this evening.
Do I have to?
Time for your speech.
Oh, it's not. It's time for introduction for the doing the financial statement is Nick. You're up.
Who's trying to skip it, Nick?
Wouldn't be the first time.
That needs to stay.
I know.
I was just gonna put something. Well, I'll start by saying it's an interesting year, to say the least. I've been to virtual annual meetings. I've been to regular annual meetings where we ate buffet and everything. I've had annual meetings canceled. I've been outside for an annual meeting. Okay, so I'll say this has been an interesting year. This would be my first hybrid meeting. I don't know if anybody's had online and in person, but annual meeting by Zoom, that was very interesting, to say the least. So it's been an interesting year. So it's also been an interesting year from a financial statement standpoint, because what we've had is quite a bit of income out there. We've had a lot of PPP income. We've had a lot of patronage income, and a lot of it's not taxable. And so because it's not taxable, it's not allocated to the membership. Okay, so we're going to get into the details of that as you're going along, but we've noticed, I've started to notice a lot of income through a lot of my clients, and when we get down to the patronage dividends, they're just not as much as people are used to, and they're especially not as much as you would expect based on the overall income. Okay, so we'll get to that through the income statement. So what I first want to look at is a statement of operations, which is usually on the right, and it happens to be on the right in this case. I'll start with the statement of operations. Okay, so that's where most people are most interested in. That's the income that we've had through the year. So it starts with sales of inventory, and that's broken down between grain and supply. Obviously, grain sales is what's coming from the membership being sold out to external parties, whereas supply sales are inventory brought in and sold to the membership. Cost of sales, that's what you pay. First, I want to say on sales, now that number is down. That's mostly down because the number of units sold is down. Okay, so we have a lot fewer receipts this year, especially in wheat. That doesn't immediately transfer to reduction in sales, but you can only sell last year's crop in this year, and so as that kind of filters its way through, you'll see that next year, without a lot of receipts, you're going to see sales going down even more next year. Cost of sales is what you paid for the grain that came in. Your average in wheat and milo was up. A lot of times that happens as you see volumes go down, you're going to see prices go up. So that's kind of where you get the sales and cost of sales change this year, last year. The gross margin, those we're fairly consistent, but because of those lower volumes, you see less gross margin. Now, gross margin's at the top, so when your gross margin is lower, that's going to affect everything below that. Okay. The good news, you're going to see just below that is the other operating income. So that's everything else that the co-op does here locally. And starts number one with storage. I call that rental of space inside the elevator. That number is up this year, even though your average number of bushels was down. You didn't pay as much in terminal, and so it offset that. The other incomes you can see, like application income, that's down because the number of acres were down. The next one you might notice is extinguishment of debt for $964,000. PPP loan was available this year, was taken advantage of by the co-op, took that benefit that was allowed, and that was forgiven during the period. Okay, so we have to get that into the income statement some way, shape, or form, and because it's debt that was subsequently forgiven, we termed it extinguishment of debt. So that's the PPP loan. So the gross income from local operations, and then the expenses just below that. Obviously, your expenses are everything it takes to do all those activities during a given year. Personnel cost was down. The wheat harvest was down. So you had a lot less of temporary employees for that. Fixed expenses, your interest was down. Is the biggest item there. Interest rates were down overall everywhere. Once coronavirus hit, we noticed that interest rates went down a lot, and that's kind of floating through everybody's financials. And then the other operating expenses, when you have half as many receipts this year as you did last year, you're going to see a lot less of other operating expenses like transfer of grain and all those different items inside of other operating expenses. So you can see your earnings from local operations at $883,000. And you're going to notice that a good portion of that PPP loan is makes up that amount. The reason, there's two different ways of dealing with PPP. One would be up above that local and one would be below. I leave it up to each client to make that decision. Some people argue that it should be above because the expenses that it's covering are based on personnel costs. So that's why the ones who will leave it up above will include it there. You might see it elsewhere where they have it down below in other earnings. In the end, it all goes to the same place. It all goes to the bottom line. Other earnings, patronage dividends, 883,000 of that number was based on CHS non-qualifieds. Non-qualifieds are non-taxable. And so that's going to be one of the numbers. When I get just below that distribution of net earnings number, I'll explain real quick. So you can see there's a couple other things like dividends on stock, get you to earnings before income taxes of $2.4 million. Now, the date that I did this financial statement, we didn't know what Congress was going to do in reference to income taxes based on the PPP loan. And so we did what was most prudent and went ahead and booked that expense of $211,000. A lot of years I get up here and I tell you that, and people think I'm a wizard, right? There's 2.4 million in earnings and you have last year almost $2,000 of income taxes. And I have to explain, it's not just because I'm a wizard of tax. You don't pay tax on member business. Okay, so the co-op itself doesn't pay it. So you can see that income taxes of $211,000. You're not going to pay that. It's going to be roughly $14,000 this year when you finally get down to writing the check for the taxes. Okay, so since that's not going to end up being taxable, that number will change. And boy, next year when I get up here, I'll have to explain it all over again because you're going to have this huge benefit that's going to come out next year. Distribution and net earnings, patronage dividends of $248,000. Of that 2.2 million of total net earnings. That number is, as I said at the beginning, it's fairly small. And it's going to be that way because of PPP loan is not taxable. And when you allocate patronage on tax, that's going to affect it greatly. The second reason is going to be because of that CHS non-qualified. If you put those two items together, the PPP plus the CHS non-qualified, you're at $1,847,000 of income that was not taxable to the co-op currently. Okay, some of that will be taxed. The CHS non-qualified will be taxed into the future, but it was not taxable this year. So you're gonna the allocations are about, it's almost a penny per hundredweight in grain, 2.5 cents in storage, and almost 0.5% in right around 0.5% in crop production. There is not an allocation in supply, which would include fuels. The biggest reason for that is, and thanks Jason for reminding me of it. It happened a little while ago, but the biggest reason for that is because of when you look at grain and crop production, they're very high member business areas of the cooperative, whereas supply is a split 50-50. So it's really based on how the expenses are allocated there. So in the end, supply did not have any amount of money to be able to allocate for patronage. So that patronage dividends is being paid out this year based on what the board chose to pay it as 100% cash patronage. The remainder, everything that's non-taxable goes directly into retained earnings. That's consistent with how you've always done it. It's consistent with your bylaws also. So any questions on the statement of operations? All right. Well, if you do have a question, you can ask me later also. I'm going to go to the left side of your financials there, talk briefly about the balance sheet. Now, the balance sheet is very interesting to the auditor, probably less interesting to the member. In the end, what matters to you is that you have enough assets to pay your liabilities, which you do. And so that's probably the most important part to you. To us, we use it to do a lot of auditing work. That's how we do a lot of our tests, how we determine that the amounts in the income statement are correct, is through the work on the balance sheet. Auditors accountants in general like to classify things. So anytime it says current, whether it's current assets or current liabilities, those are going to be things that are either receivable, if it's an asset, or payable within 1 year. Okay, so those are going to be your liquid assets and your liquid liabilities. Biggest thing we like to keep in mind is that difference between those two, the current assets and the current liabilities. Call that liquidity. So that's how much money you would have to pay your current liabilities. If you look at that and you really get down to it, you've got enough assets to cover both your current and long-term liabilities at this point. So that's a good position to be in. Some of the changes a little bit in talk briefly in the current assets. The biggest one that I was focused on was that inventory. Even though you had fewer bushels, you had more company ownership at the end of the year. And so you have a lot more, your own position in inventories is much higher. And so that's one of the biggest numbers that you can see. It's also affecting your grains payable below, because not all of that grain that is bought, that's owned, has been paid for yet. In some instances, you, the member, have chosen to wait to get your money. A lot of that would be already paid by today, because it's paid. Would it have been paid today, or it would have been paid today? That's right, because the first was on Friday, so it would have been paid today. Some of that would extend past that. Investments. Your total investments with CHS, including qualified, non-qualified, 6.7 million. Of that, 8.2. Land O'Lakes is another 1.1 million. So these are cooperatives that your co-op is a member of. Limited liability includes SCO Ag and Wind River. Property, plant, and equipment was pretty consistent. You did add an elevator leg at Modoc. Was it Modoc? Yep, Modoc. So that's where you get to your total assets of 55 million. Now, that's what you own. That's what you have rights to. Just below that's who you owe that to. So your current liabilities are owed to various parties. Some, like grain contracts payable, which is the largest number, is owed back to the membership. So if you think about it, your cooperative is heavily invested on by your membership. Your membership not only has the members' equity, but you've got all this grains payable. You're financing, and I know your banker's told you this a million times, but your own membership is financing the cooperative for the most part. So that's what we see through the current liabilities, the grain contracts payable. That would be for grain that's been delivered, just hasn't been paid. The notes payable amount, that's only current maturities on long-term debt. And so that just kind of adds each year as those mature. I'm going to drop down there to patronage dividends payable. That 248,000 is 100% cash patronage. That would be what is written out in checks during the current year. And then you've been setting up an equity retirement for equity redemptions of 100,000. The big number I should discuss there, income taxes payable, 216,000. You are not going to actually pay that amount. And so we'll see a difference come next year. On the long-term liability, so those are things that are just not due within the next year. Okay, so they're going to do greater than 1 year from today. And you can see even there, the membership is the number one place where that's financing the cooperative in that area also, because that's where the grain contracts payable are from. Members' equity, last year, your allocation was 80% in cash, and so you see how your common stock is going down a little bit. You actually paid out more equity redemptions last year than you added through patronage dividends, because you had an 80% cash allocation last year. Any questions so far on the balance sheet? All right, well, I like to finish each time explaining a little bit. We did an unmodified opinion. As auditors, that's the best we can do. We also call it a clean opinion sometimes, but it's the most assurance that we can give on a set of financials. And we do tests. As the staff knows, we come in and essentially hassle them for a week and a half, just kind of depends. Ask a bunch of questions, recalculate things. We look at details, we confirm items. So those are the kind of things we do to give them unmodified opinion. And again, this year we're doing an unmodified opinion. And I always like to finish just by saying thanks. Thanks for letting us be your independent auditor. And if you ever have any questions, let me know.
I'll give a little report now. First of all, I would like to thank the board of directors, Cole and Bridget Carpenter. Thank you the last year working with you guys over the Mark and Cindy. Thank you. Landon and Angie. Thank you. Mark and Leah, Shasta and Sarah, Joe and Tara, Russ and Darla, Jeff and Terry, Jonathan and Carrie, Paul and Shirley. And I also would like to thank my wife for putting up with me. That sometimes gets to be a chore. So with that, from there, I would like to thank all of the employees of the Scott Co-op. We appreciate everything that you guys do. Sometimes I'm sure it goes unnoticed, but as a board of directors, thank you. And we appreciate every single thing you do. Jason, working with you as the chairman this last year, I've learned a lot. Thank you for guiding me along and sometimes even holding my hand. So it's been a tough year for the Scott Co-op with all the COVID and all the we've had to deal with, and we've had a fair year after going through all what we've been through, and lack of rain. I guess that's always a big issue with being in the stuff is, and we've got through it, and I think we're going to be better next year, just dealing with what we've had to deal with. So thank you for everybody that's stuck there. We've had some tough good retirements. I'm sure Steve Kite retiring at the elevator. I'm sure he's enjoying himself and is with his retirement today. I seen a Facebook post of him driving down the road headed south. So I'm sure he's enjoying his time under his retirement. And Scott C., man, you got tough shoes to fill, but I know you can do it. And we're looking forward to working with you from here on. Bob retiring. Thanks, Bob, for all you've done for the Scott Co-op. I've really enjoyed working with you as a customer. And, it's just been great working with you. And Mark and Doug's got big shoes to fill, but I'm sure they can do a very good job following behind you. And it's been great. And the station here at the Scott Co-op, man, Mark, you've turned that around, and all your whole group, man, that's awesome. Thank you. It's been a joy. With that, as a Scott Co-op organization, I've enjoyed. This is my last meeting. I've enjoyed working with all of you. It's been interesting. I've learned a lot. I've learned the co-op system, and it's been very good for me. So with that, thank you. Also, thanks, Nick. I've got to work with you for 8 years now, and it's been a joy. I've learned a lot from you. It's been an honor and a privilege to go through this with you. Charles and Brett, I'd like to thank you guys. I mean, we've had some stuff that we've had to work through with the Scott Co-op, and you guys have always been there by our side, and I've enjoyed learning from you guys. So it's been a pleasure. And with that, I don't have anything more. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thank you, Mike. I'm sorry, I will not be that brief. I'd like to start by thanking you all for attending the 64th Annual Stockholders Meeting of the Scott Cooperative Association. It has been a real privilege serving as your CEO this past year. I would also like to thank the Board of Directors and their wives for their selfless service to the Scott Co-op. It has been a pleasure working with all of you. I would especially like to thank Paul Stricker and Mike Nicholson for their excellent service the last 6 years. They have both reached term limits and are not eligible for re-election this year. We'll see what we can do next year. I would also like to thank my wife, Nikki, for all of her support in this role. Like Mike, that is a challenge. I would like to extend a special thank you to the employee group for all your hard work this year. This organization would not be what it is without you guys. You truly are our greatest asset. We've had a few changes this year to our employee group. Mike spoke about a few of them, but I'd like to share a few others with you. In the crop production department, we hired Melvin Murphy this year as a truck driver, and he is helping tender our rigs and make deliveries to the farm. In the stations, we added Ross Farr at Marienthal and Todd Morris in Scott City. We also hired Dalen Kerr in the fuel department to deliver fuel after Bob Blair retired after 50 years of service to the Scott Co-op. At the elevators, Scott C. was promoted to operations manager with the retirement of Steve Kite. We also hired Randy Murphy at Marienthal, Drew Kite and Esteban Guillen to help out at Scott City, Grigson, and Manning. And most recently, we hired Letitia Amezqua to manage our Manning elevator. In the office, we added Amanda Cranwell as our new assistant grain merchandiser and Jelaine Skinner as our new accounts receivable clerk. All of these individuals have been great additions to your staff, and we look forward to working with them moving forward into 2021 and hopefully beyond. The classic Charles Dickens novel, A Tale of Two Cities, begins with the phrase, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." That sounds a lot like the Scott Co-op 2020 fiscal year. To truly appreciate our fiscal year, I'm going to tell you the story of two very different halves of our year. The fiscal year began last November feeling like any other year. We started the year with excellent corn and milo stocks in the elevator, and we were in a position to make a decent margin on those bushels. The marketing staff did a great job, and they took advantage of those opportunities. And the grain department started off the first quarter of the year with phenomenal earnings. In addition to strong margins, storage revenue was up significantly over the prior year due to a record 2019 corn crop. The crop production department began the year with excellent seed prepays and strong chemical sales. Anhydrous volumes were up from the prior year, and it felt like things were moving along well for a strong fiscal year. The fuel department had strong fuel contract volumes, and the stations were working to build on their improved financial performance from the prior year. Through the first 5 months of the year, our local earnings were just over $1.5 million, and we were very excited about where we were and the remainder of the year. Little did we know what March and the following months had in store for us. When the pandemic hit, we saw things happen in the fuel markets that we never thought possible. Oil futures went negative for the first time in history. Our cost of gasoline was less than the motor fuel tax that we charged on those gallons. And everyone that had contracted fuel immediately regretted doing so. Our fuel staff found themselves scrambling to work with customers to find solutions to cost average fuel down and to roll contracts to ease the burden of the rapid fall in fuel prices. The dry weather made it very difficult for our sales staff to move fertilizer, especially as prices moved backwards due to the pandemic, and our inventory was overpriced compared to the market. We also saw a lot of guys returning corn seed and either planting milo or allowing ground to fallow until wheat drilling. In the grain markets, we saw volatility throughout the summer months, and then we experienced a milo basis run like nothing we have ever seen before, and we may never see again. Our past marketing strategies did not work, and we were caught on the wrong side of milo basis the entire year. This rapid change in events caused the second half of the year to be one that we would like to forget. And we ended up the year with $883,000 in local earnings. But as you can see from your financial statements, that would have been a negative number without the Paycheck Protection Program. Even though the year did not go as planned, we had several bright spots that I would like to talk to you about. In the grain department, while we did not do a great job of marketing milo and corn, the marketing staff continued to find ways to stay competitive and limit losses as much as possible. The board of directors approved building a new leg at Modoc, replacing a 2,500 bushel an hour leg with a 10,000 bushel an hour leg, which greatly improved the harvest process there. The board also made the decision this fall to purchase protein testers so that we can test every load of wheat next harvest and have a protein scale to better compensate you based on the quality of your crop. Additionally, we saw another excellent year of storage and handling revenue, and we continue to have very strong deferred grains payables that continues to show your faith in your co-op. In the crop production department, we saw good growth in chemical sales and margins, and despite the dry weather, saw near record seed sales again this year. Our crop production department was also very pleased to be one of only a handful of crop production departments to be selected for a beta group of a drone program in conjunction with our Climate Field View offering. Finally, we are very pleased to share that the Scott City Service Station had positive earnings of just over $50,000, which is the first positive number in that department in several decades. As we look forward to 2021, the board and management continue to focus on the goals that we've set for ourselves over the last several years. We have continued to find ways to have profitable years the last 4 and have increased our working capital by over $4 million in the last 5 years. This improvement in earnings and working capital has given us the ability to borrow money to build infrastructure and continue to look at growth opportunities as they arise. The board and management are continuing to look at where additional capital improvements are needed and hope to continue toward our goal of 5 million bushels of additional grain storage in 10 years. We are committed to having a better presence on your farm, and Bob Blair has agreed to stick around part-time and help with that. This past year was not great for that, but Bob looks forward to hitting the ground running here in the next couple of months. Additionally, we are continuing to explore technology and product offerings in the crop production department to help make your farms more efficient and more profitable. Finally, we continue working to build on the improved profitability of the stations so that we can continue to offer that very important service to our membership. In closing, I would like to thank you again for attending the annual meeting this evening and for your loyalty and patronage this past year. We look forward to working with all of you to make 2021 a great year here at the co-op and on your farms.
I would like the chairman of the nomination committee to come forward with that.
We'll have the election of the directors now. The nominating committee this year consisted of myself, John Beaton, Craig Ramsey, Greg Dirks, Paul Stricker, and Mike Nicholson. The nominating committee met on Tuesday, December 15th with the purpose of nominating members to run for the open positions of the board of directors. The nominating committee has nominated Joe Bierman, Mark Kramer, and Chase Tenhamy for the expiring terms of Mike Nicholson, Paul Stricker, and Mark Kramer. The qualifications to be a director are as follows. He shall be a member of the association or authorized representative of an incorporated member. Shall be in shall not be in competition with the association. And C, a retired member cannot serve on the board. Are there any nominations from the floor? Are there any nominations from the floor? Are there any nominations from the floor? If there are no nominations from the floor, we will close the nominations. At this time, I would entertain a motion to cast a unanimous ballot for Joe Bierman, Mark Kramer, and Chasten Hamey for the open director positions.
I second.
I have a motion by Alan Dearden. I didn't catch the second over here.
Craig Tuttle.
Craig Tuttle.
I second.
And I have a second by Craig Tuttle. Are there any objections? If there are no objections, a unanimous ballot will be cast for Joe Bierman, Mark Kramer, and Chasten Hamey for the board of directors. Thank you.
Is there any old business with the Scott Co-op? Anybody have anything? Any new business? Charles, you're up. How you like that? Feel the bus coming? Talk about the new bylaws. Proposed.
Good evening. Up for membership approval will be amendments to the bylaws that were sent out to you all in the notice packet. I'm just going to generally discuss what those are, and then we'll field any questions that you might have on those proposed amendments. They were presented to the board of directors and approved there, so they have to now go in front of the membership for approval. Looking at taking them in the order and how they will appear or appear in the proposed amendments in the bylaws at this point in time. First would be an amendment under Article 1 membership with the addition of Section 11, that is for the postponement of meeting of members. Just generally, this would allow specifically for this meeting to be postponed in the event of any inclement weather or the occurrence of any kind of catastrophic event. This last year, as general counsel for several different boards and co-ops, we found that this was something that was going to be necessary, that we were addressing sometimes for the first time due to COVID. This time of year, because of your guys' annual meeting, it's also probably something that with the inclement weather might be important. And it just provides that in the event of inclement weather or the occurrence of a catastrophic event, the meeting of the members may be postponed by the president, and provides that notice of the adjourned meeting shall be given by the president in any media of general circulation or broadcast serving the area. The next proposed amendment is in Article 5 under directors. There is both in Section 4 and in Section 6 places where the term corporation is being proposed to be changed to association. That is just to keep it consistent throughout the bylaws, all the rest of the way through the bylaws. Scott Co-op is referred to as the association. with the exception of those two sections. And I think when they were added at some point in time, it was just an oversight. They refer to Scott Co-op as the corporation. So it's, while we were in the process of proposing amendments, it's just thought to be a good idea to make those consistent throughout the bylaws to be changed to association. Next is the addition of section 12 under Article 5. It is titled Unanimous Consent in Writing. Unless otherwise prohibited by law, board actions may be taken without a meeting and without a formal vote if unanimous consent of the board is obtained in writing, setting forth the action taken in detail, and the detail is signed by all board members entitled to vote. This just allows the board, again, to take action without calling a formal meeting, appearing, and voting if there is a written document setting out in detail what action the board is going to take, and it is signed and consented to by all of the board members. It doesn't allow the board to take any actions that the board could not take in a formal meeting. This was something that we have, for a number of years, been counseling our clients to place in their bylaws to allow them to do. This last year, in a couple of situations, it again was highlighted the need for that to be done, especially at a time when boards weren't able to meet in person and certain actions needed to be taken. Just the time and expense of calling a special meeting sometimes for something that is very simple can be alleviated with this type of addition to your bylaws. An example we had is one of our clients had made, they had the general consensus of the board, put it that way, to go ahead and go forth and applying for the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program. But there was some additional research that needed to be done that they were uncertain about, and had asked us to do some of it, and had asked their accountants or CPA to do some research. We were able to get that information back to the board, and in that situation, because we were able to, all they had asked us to do was confirm certain information. We were able to confirm that information, but because because of that, the board was wanting to go forward and go with the application to the PPP program. But because they did not have this option available to them under the bylaws, that board had to call a special meeting and have a meeting and a formal vote on that action. We pointed it out that this was an option if they would amend their bylaws. They also have amended their bylaws to include this, so that in the event of something like that again in the future, they're going to be able to simply draft the written action, circulate it to all the board members by electronic mail, get everybody's consent to that, and have it done in a manner that is much more efficient and cost effective for the board members as well as for the association. The last amendment is to the amendment to the fiscal year, and still yours, Jason. And that is under Article 8, Section 1, proposing that the fiscal year of the association be changed to end on the last day of January. It is currently the last day of October. That fits, moving or changing that to the last day of January fits better with the business of the association of the co-op. So those are the proposed amendments. You'll have the opportunity to vote on each one individually when you cast that vote, but open for any questions or comments at this point in time. Okay, thank you very much.
Wanted to discuss a few of those from a management perspective and the board's perspective. First off, those bylaw amendments were unanimously recommended by the board of directors and the management team. I'm going to work backwards a little bit on those. The reason that we started the process of bylaw amendments in general was the fiscal year end change. As you guys, if you've been on the board, if you've been around the co-op much, you can probably understand the challenge of an October 31 fiscal year end, especially as fall harvest has become more and more of a primary harvest for the Scott Co-op. There are a lot of challenges, to say the least, for the staff, for the accounting department, for the auditors, trying to get a good, clean grain cutoff, trying to get a good feel for grain contracts that are carried over to the next year, so on and so forth. We've also faced several challenges in the crop production department in that almost every year exclusively, the cheapest time of the year for fertilizer is right around the end of our fiscal year. And inevitably, seems like 1 out of every 3 years, we're having to write down inventory at the end of the year just to basically write it back up and go as the market would come spring. So the board and management are recommending a January 31 year end for that purpose. It follows our business cycle more closely than our current cycle. The unanimous consent from the board, this just more than anything saves these guys who are very busy a lot of time. We were in a similar situation to what Charles talked about, and we just continued to have special meetings to discuss PPP and other programs and other situations coming up with COVID. And so we wore these guys out with Zoom meetings this spring. And so the unanimous consent thing would have taken care of half to 2/3 of the issues that were brought forth, and it would be a good addition. Then the postponement of the annual meeting just makes sense. We don't plan to use it, hope we never have to use it, but much rather have it there and not need it than need it and not have it. So that would be our recommendation, and I'll turn it back over to Mike for you guys' vote.
With that, the piece of paper that everybody should have, that we will need to have everybody vote yes or no for that. And for each individual item, I think there's four on that sheet of paper. So anyway, anybody have any more questions about that? If not, we'll ask for a vote. Jordan's got some baskets here to everybody turn there. Cool right there.
There you go. Those are the we got.
Thank you. I need somebody to go. And with that, we'll let don't forget it, Jordan.
Need them all.
And with that, I will turn it back over to Jason to do service bins.
Just before I do that, this is usually where we take a couple minutes and just open up the floor. Do you guys have any questions, comments, tomatoes to throw at the board, whatever? For the board, for myself, crickets. I like it. As Mike said, I've got a handful of service pins that I would like to award tonight. We award service pins to employees every 5 years of service. This year, we've got several 5-year pins. And then we've got a 15-year pin, and then we've got one that's historical that we'll be handing out that probably won't ever get to do again. But to start with, 5-year pins, Abel Areola. I don't think Abel's here tonight. Abel works at our Marienthal elevator. He has been over there for obviously 5 years. Abel just gets things done. You probably don't see him much. You probably haven't ever talked to him. I wouldn't understand him if you did, but that's okay. He just shows up every single day, does whatever's asked of him, and I've never heard a complaint and see a smile on his face every day that he's there. Next, I've got Greg Brown. I think Greg's here. Greg has managed our Marienthal elevator for the past 5 years. Stepped in through a transitional period there, and has done a good job for us. Continues to manage that, keep the office in check, and most notably keep Mike Rapier in check. So appreciate that, Greg. Next, I have Victor Cardona. Is Victor here? Victor didn't make it this evening either. Victor is one of the elevator guys at MODOC. Like Abel, you may not have talked to Victor much. He just kind of bounces around, does whatever's needed, has a smile on his face 100% of the time, just really, really enjoys what he does, takes a lot of pride in his work. Been very lucky to have him out there. And he's really looking forward to kind of stepping up as Sam Vallejo looks to retire next year. Got Mitchell O'Day. Mitchell, I know, is back there. Mitchell works in our crop production department. Mitchell has been driving our liquid rig for the last 5 years. Does a great job. Seen a lot of early mornings and a lot of late nights. He's put a lot of hours in that spray rig. Excited about the new one, I'm quite certain, and does a very nice job for us. And the last 5-year pin that I have to give this evening is Adam Riggs. Adam also works in our crop production department. Adam started out running one of our liquid rigs. And then when we decided to trade 2 for 1 and kind of downsize so that we get more acres on the 2 rigs we've got between Andy and Mitchell's, Adam didn't skip a beat, stepped right in, started driving a tender truck, and then pretty quickly got the opportunity to drive our dry rig. So he'll put 50 to 60,000 acres a year on that dry rig. Once again, just like Mitchell, there when you need him to be there, early mornings, late night, doesn't matter. He just gets it done. So appreciate it, Adam. Yeah, I've got one 15-year pin this year, Mike Barnett. There's not really a good job description to describe what Mike does for our crop production department. Technically, he's a truck driver. That is the most insulting thing I could ever say about Mike. Mike is just one of those guys, grew up in the generation that just did whatever needed done whenever it needed done, can work on anything, will work on anything, has really been a mentor for these younger guys, taught them a lot, and just steps in whenever. We're really happy to have you, Mike. Thank you. And last but absolutely not least, I've got a 50-year service pin for Bob Blair. Let that sink in for a little bit. 50 years. Come on up, Bob. Bob doesn't need an introduction. I don't need to tell you what Bob has done and hasn't done, but he's done it all in the fuel department. He's been the guy and the face of the Sky Co-op to a lot of farmers. I'd love to have a penny for every gallon of fuel you deliver, Bob.
So would you.
He's flat wore out 3 or 4 trucks in the time, plus all the time he put in the station. It is truly an honor to stand up here and present this to you, Bob, because 50 years is something to be proud of. We're proud to have had you, and we're glad you're willing to stick around and help part-time moving forward. But we really know the reason for that is Karen just can't handle you yet. We're glad, we're very happy for you, Bob. I am hopeful, but not optimistic that I will get to give another one of those 50-year pins out someday. But that's an accomplishment. Before we move on, I would like to also discuss a couple other changes that I wasn't able to do earlier. Like I said, Steve Kite retired at the end of December. Unfortunately, you won't see him and be able to congratulate him. It was unfortunate that we weren't able to have a little bit more fanfare for his retirement. But Steve has moved on to San Marcos, Texas, and is enjoying the weather. Shauna Kramer announced her retirement effective December 31 of 2020. Shauna, as we would all expect from Shauna, didn't want any fanfare, didn't want anybody to even know about it. Just let me ride off into the sunset. So we'll be looking to backfill that position in the near future. And then we've got a few retirements coming up in the next year. So looking forward to sharing the next stage of those people's lives with them. But we will be obviously replacing a lot of experience and have replaced a lot of experience. And so we've been very fortunate, but all good things come to an end. So I wanted to share that with you. Mike?
Okay, on the, guess we'll jump ahead a little bit on the proposed articles. Postponement of the meeting of the members passed 22-0, so it passed. Unanimous consent in writing was 19-3. Fiscal year end passed 22-0. Language update to provide consistency passed 22-0. So everything passed. Thank you.
So you will notice a lack of a box of old dusty stuff from the service station this year. We decided to change up the drawings for the door prizes a little bit this year. Would somebody bring the box up? We'll need those. But get your tickets out. What we're doing this year, something you actually want, cash. So we've decided that this year we're going to give away 5 early equity retirements. So we will draw for a $100 early equity retirement, a $250, a $500, a $750, and a $1,000 early equity retirement. If your name is drawn, we will make note of that. Stop by the office sometime in the next week and we will have a check for you, and that will come out of your deferred equity payables. So whenever that comes up, we'll We'll do that. Hold up, Mike. Did everybody get a ticket? Okay, we need to, we've got like, I mean, the five tickets in here are gonna be very happy. But if you didn't get a ticket, would you raise your hand and we'll, yeah.
Draw.
Snooze, you lose.
Carrie, if you have my luck, there's 6 tickets in there. I know which one's not getting drawn. That's gonna be very, very anticlimactic. Don't hand out both sides, guys. Need a few more up here. Need a few more, Brian. 4. And 2 or 3 over here. Need about 6 or 8.
Who's got?
I got one, I'm good. I'll take another one.
Say, grab 2 cold and pick.
That's right. It's bad.
You got them?
The odds are better in this one than any drawing we had.
Odds aren't bad. Everybody got a ticket now? So for $100 early equity retirement, 3367.
Yeah.
Redraw.
Yeah, that's right.
250, 3353. Rigged.
Family.
I get half. $3361 for $500. Devin?
Can't beat that, huh, Devin?
Been paid less to come to a meeting, haven't you? $750, 3358. Alan? And for the grand prize, $1,000, 3374. Mark Crane. Wasn't all.
That pretty well concludes the results of the election. We've also voted for all 3 members are on the board. So with that announcement that we'll have an organizational meeting of the board of directors will be held immediately following the stockholders meeting. With that, adjournment, unless Jason has anything more. Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thanks for coming.
Right, Mike, I brought these for you because I'm so this is the income letter. He's so cute.
You already voted to keep it.
On it. Already got it updated for your new fiscal year end.
But I don't have to sign nothing, I'm done.
I know.
I'm old.
I know, you got to do the report.